Hello everyone, and today we are going to show a beautiful game in the Russian Bongcloud Rapid 2020, so last year. It is between Sergey Dubyl and Wartnik Arachnikov. Both of them are BM rated, so it is bound to be a very nice game. Uh, some people are already calling this Dubyl's Immortal game. I don't know about that, but he has certainly played some very excellent moves throughout his career. So without further ado, let's go on to move number one. So we see e4, e5, king e2, d6, and d4. So this is the Philidor defense d4 line. It's fine. It's played quite often in tournament play. So we see king e7, f3, knight f6, king e3, and g5. So here Dubyl opts for the g5 line in the classical d4 line. It's quite sensical. It sort of blocks a king side advance and closes the continuation, makes it quite sharp. Don't really want to be playing this in blitz, for example, because you will lose your games. So now we see d takes and d takes e5, captures, and then this allows the knight e2 move. So you can later take advantage of this d4 square, and it can be quite strong for white if played incorrectly. Uh, Obviously, black can take the queen here, but it's not actually beneficial because after something like bishop e2, you see some sort of hole emerging for black, and it doesn't actually offer you any tempo. So we see b6 played, the fianchetto line of the g5, uh, the g5 Philidor. So now we see knight b to c3 and bishop h6. Uh, Here there's plenty of continuations. It's not actually incredibly clear how to continue for either side. But here we see Arachnikov go for move knight to d4. And this is quite a common move actually in these sorts of positions. You want to uh, trade off for the center and really allow your king to advance up toward the g file. Uh, it is just beneficial for white to try and go for these squares, especially once your queenside pieces as black have not been developed. It's quite dangerous because if you move the queen, then there's only a rook, and it can be quite difficult quite quickly. Uh, Although there are plenty of other moves. For example, King f2 was played in 1997 by Chopard and Tiffany. Uh, and after this, we follow Queen d6 and Bishop e3. And from this move, it is a completely different game. So this was not played in the game. We see knight to d4, e takes d4, check, king d3, uh, a6 check, king d2, and then d6, king d6. So this is quite an aggressive bong from black. It's there are a lot of pieces out very early, and there are plenty of chances that you will mess up because the center sort of bong with not much pawn development and structure is quite weak actually. Uh, if you play incorrectly, that is, of course, these are two bone masters, and you are less likely to see a mistake in this sort of level of play. So of course, white plays correctly and plays b3, and here Dubyl plays the first of one of his interesting moves. We see a sort of LMN-esque bishop blunder here with a bishop takes on f1. Rook takes on f1, a counter blunder. Quite an impressive move to find. I believe he had about 6 minutes left on his clock at this point, so it's it's he spent about 2 minutes of his time looking for this move, and it's quite impressive that he found it in the time pressure he had. So then we see knight c6, bishop b2. So he's fianchettoing out the dark square bishop in the hopes that black will reposition his own bishop and white can continue to play kingside. Of course, in a high-level tournament such as this, you are not likely to see that because black is very developed down the center, and uh, it's so hard for white to break through on the queen side uh, if the king side is not allowed and you don't have the pieces to get there. So black does not allow this. He plays queen e8, Dubyl with quite a strong move. It's mostly developing, but it has traps later on. So we see queen to e2, just defending this center pawn, sort of allowing some dangerous traps along the line, especially even if takes, you have bishop takes or even king takes, and it can be quite complicated, quite trappy in this sort of position. Uh, so black just kind of wants to simplify here, plays bishop f8, uh, sort of moving the king along the board with a lot of space, actually, a lot of tempo, considering white's sort of, I wouldn't say desperate, but a quite aggressive attempt to open the king side. So now we see knight to d5. It's quite logical. You could see queen c4 instead, and that is also quite a strong move. This is slightly quicker. I wouldn't say it's sharper, but it definitely acts on tempo a lot stronger, considering the position, and maybe that was the correct choice. So we see knight takes on d5, e takes on d5, and then bishop to h6. So black cannot be sort of moved around. He wants to keep this position, even if white takes the knight there after queen takes. Something like king c5, it is quite clear that black is just winning because you still have both your rooks, and it's quite impossible to actually get up the board, especially with this really strong bishop on h6 now. So black cannot be swayed, and after the trade returns the bishop to the powerful h6 square. Queen takes on e8 and h takes on e8. We see bishop takes on d4 and then g4 with check. King to d3, knight takes on d4, king takes on d4, and then bishop g7 check. This is quite a strong move to find. It actually allows the king to move out and ignore the pawn to a certain degree once you bring your rook out. White's rooks look very inactive at this time, and the pawn structure is not actually great for white. So to play this move, Dubyl is a very intelligent man, and you shall see later how this develops into a very strong endgame. So we see king to c4, rook to e5. Again, it all comes off the back of the bishop move to g7, and it's really tough actually for white to get his rooks into the game at this point. So white plays rook a e1, and just trying to trade the rooks. This position is one where, while black has much more development behind them, white actually has tempo because of this rook move. Black has to play something, otherwise he's just losing his position, and having one rook in the back rank against fifth rank king is not going to be strong for black at all. considering Black's king is only on the third rank at this time. Uh, so here, Dubyl plays an incredible move. I will give you a few seconds while I drink my water, and I will allow you to find the move. Okay, so if you found the move, very well done. It's an incredible move. To find this, you must be a very strong Bongcloud player. But for all of you who just want to enjoy the show and see the game, Black plays a beautiful novelty with king to e7. So it gambits the rank for the king, firstly. It does not hang any material or position or rank for the king. Because if you play king to b5 here, it's actually really weak. Because you can play something like king d7, and you just have so much control. The white king will never move anywhere. It's kind of like a cornered rabbit setup, but in late game. And if you enjoy playing as white, you will know how difficult it can be to advance your king, even with pieces in a cornered rabbit setup. So it's really not good to try and sort of push out of this position. It's incredibly difficult to find any sort of answer here. So and the rook is also there. Now the rook has a scope. It has a purpose. The king can essentially play kingside or continue down the center. So of course white has to find a powerful move here. White plays d6 with check. It's quite a good move. I don't know if it's good enough to beat Dubyl here with such a strong setup. So Dubyl plays king to f6, now playing down the king side, ignoring the pawn. Uh, White plays rook to d1, trying to sort of push the isolated pawn, but it's not actually escorting the king anymore. By pushing it, your king is now quite unable to move because of the rook. Even if you move the bishop, there are so many threats for black here. So we see rook to c8, again ignoring the push, which is actually quite potent. You know, to really ignore such a strong piece, saying okay, well you can push it, but your king is not moving, is quite valiant. It's quite strong. It's most players would not play this. Most players would either push a pawn or try and make some sort of battery with rooks. It's to play this move is quite beautiful, honestly. Uh, but yes, so continuing on with the game, we see f4 push, just trying to move the rook away. We see rook to h5, perfectly logical. You just want to attack the pawn and create some threats so that the king can push down kingside. We see d7 now. The pawn is now pushing quite close to this rook, and you need to be careful because there are plenty of traps here for white. If you ignore it for too long, then it can be game losing, honestly, because your king is not going to get anywhere when the white king is marching off the board. Uh, so black does not actually care at all, and plays rook d8, and just prepares their g-file bomb here. Ignores moves such as c4, it just accepts the tempo and knows how strong this bishop is on g7. Uh, and white doesn't actually have an awful lot of threat here. There's f5, yes, with the rook defending the pawn, but once you move your king out of the way, it's the bishop actually defends the square, so you're not actually going to advance without some sort of extra help, and the king is far outside of help range. So we see rook to d6 check. You can actually take it here, and it's not too bad. It does allow the king to move around a lot, especially with the tempo, you can move the rook in, but black does not take the rook here, plays king f5 very calmly, and says, okay, you know, you have to move your rook eventually because you know you're trying to win too, theoretically. So I don't need to worry about your defense when my attack is so strong. So we see g3 just closing the endgame, and it's now basically playing for a draw. There are not many moves that keep white in a sort of attacking, winning position here, and so Arachnikov knows the strength of his opponent, knows that you know Dubyl is incredibly strong in end games, and you don't want to fight that. I guess I don't think um, within the tournament this to get a draw would still advance him onto uh, I think second, like in the runnings for second place. So to take a draw here is not the end of the world at all for Arachnikov, and you know it's quite clear here that he's just playing for a draw. So we see rook takes on h2, and that's quite strong. You know the rook is now active. We see king to b5, and now in this position, Dubyl plays a very strong move. He like there are I'd say there are like three or four strong moves here that you can play as black, and they're all winning, but to varying degrees of pace. So, but Dubyl finds the best move, the machine move. He finds rook takes on c2. Uh, and it's in this position that Arachnikov resigned the game. Uh, Dubyl later went on to win his match against Bakusmok to win second place in the tournament. Okay, so I was wrong. This was this was like the quarterfinals. Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. But yes, there are plenty of sort of continuations after this. I'd say none of them are exactly winning for white. They all have traps within them, but at this level, you're not going to see sort of traps in the end game. It's just not going to happen. You can play a rook to e1 here, which is the better move. Uh, but after c takes and rook e8, rook to c5 with check, king moves out the way to a6, and rook takes on d7, you have no answer. You have nothing to support your pawn. The king is just going to run down the h file and for black, and you know you can't even trade the rooks off. It's just impossibly losing for white, and that is actually the best move. Although it's not like uh, after plenty of lines, you know, you could a king e4 is a mistake, but it's still winning. Instead of playing the incredible rook c2, and then you see rook e1 check, and then you know it you see king f3, and although this is slower to play king e4, that was not even what was played. It was the beautiful move, rook takes on c2, and yeah, it was in this position Arachnikov resigned, and yes, this was a beautiful game. You know, people calling it Dubyl's Immortal, and if you enjoyed this game, feel free to share it with your friends at the bar and the library, and you can see my two of my other videos here, and yeah.